Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech idea. Today we are taking a look at the Necrobloom. It is a 4 mana 2/7 with Landfall, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/1 green plant creature token. If you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token instead. This means that we have a Field of the Dead in our command zone, and in addition to that it gives all of our land cards in our graveyard dredge 2. This means you may return a land card from your graveyard to your hand and mill 2 cards instead of drawing a card. In this deck we want to win with an army of tokens due to a lot of landfall triggers, and we also want to re-loop all of the land cards that we have in our graveyard. When it comes to landfall synergies, we play Felidar Retreat, a 4 mana enchantment, and whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, choose 1. Either you create a 2/2 white cat beast creature token, or you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain vigilance until end of turn. This is quite dangerous in the early game and also in the late game, simply because you can pump up your small plant creature tokens, and vigilance is always a nice keyword to have on your creatures, so you can swing at your opponents without being afraid of a clapback. We also play Springheart Nantuku, a 2 mana 1/1, and we can also bestow it for 2 mana as an enchantment on one of our creatures. An enchanted creature gets +1/+1. It also has a landfall mechanic, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2 mana if Springheart Nantuku is attached to a creature you control. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature. If you didn't create a token this way, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. One of our top end creatures is Avenger of Zendikar, a 7 mana 5/5, and when it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each land you control. It also has a landfall mechanic, so whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each plant creature you control. When playing a landfall strategy, you also have to play Skewed Swarm, a 3 mana 1/1, and whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token, and if you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Skewed Swarm instead. Due to the dredge mechanic of the Necrobloom, we can also play Turntimber Sower, a 3 mana 3/3, and whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, create a 0/1 green plant creature token. We can pay 1 green mana and sacrifice 3 creatures to return target land card from your graveyard to your hand. Another powerful enchantment in this deck is Zendikar's Royal, a 5 mana enchantment, and whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 green elemental creature token. This is how we are going to build an army of creature tokens, and now we want to have several landfall triggers in a turn, which is why we play the following enchantments. For example, Burgeoning, a 1 green enchantment, and whenever an opponent plays a land, you may pull a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. In a lot of different decks you run out of gas really quickly when it comes to having lands in your hand, but due to the fact that the Necrobloom has dredge 2, we can keep refilling our hands with land cards whenever we would draw a card. We play Exploration, a 1 mana green enchantment. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. We also play Undergrowth Reckon, a 3 mana enchantment, and at the beginning of your upkeep, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Another powerful enchantment that we definitely have to play in this deck is Insidious Roots, a 2 mana enchantment, and creature tokens you control have tapped them at 1 mana of any color. In addition to that, whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 green plant creature token, then put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. The second line of this card is not that easy to achieve, but with a few reanimation effects we can also get this one going. But the most relevant thing is the first line, which will turn all of our creature tokens into mana dogs. We ramp a little bit different in this deck because we have no problem with playing cards like Antish Restoration, a 3 mana instant. And first of all, you sacrifice a land, then you search a library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then you shuffle. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, instead search your library for up to 3 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We want to cast ramp spells that also make us sacrifice our lands, so we can dredge them back into your hand with the Necrobloom. This is also why we play Harrow, a 3 mana instant, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a land, and search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield and then shuffle. We play Springbloom Druid, a 3 mana 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield you may sacrifice a land. If you do search a library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Realms Uncharted is great in this deck, a 3 mana instant, search a library for 4 land cards with different names and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards, put the chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest into your hand, then shuffle your library. We don't care about what our opponent throws into our graveyard because we will just dredge it back with the Necrobloom. Blossoming Tortoise, a 4 mana 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, mill 3 cards, then return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Activated abilities of lands you control cost 1 generic less to activate, and land creatures you control get +1/+1. We also play Roiling Regrowth, a 3 mana instant, sacrifice a land, search a library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle your library. When it comes to utility lands, we play a few of them, for example Field of the Dead. Field of the Dead enters the battlefield tapped, you can tap it to add 1 colorless mana, and whenever it or another land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. We play Spymaster's Vault, it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp, and for 1 black and tapping it, target creature you control connives X, where X is the number of creatures that died this turn. You have no problem with jump blocking with all of your plant and zombie tokens, and when they die you can still connive one of your creatures to fill up your graveyard. Given the Township, it taps to make 1 colorless, and for 4 mana and tapping it, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. We are going to flood the board with tokens, so this is a great pump up effect. Boseiju Who Endures, a legendary land which taps for green mana, and for 2 mana and discarding it, destroy target artifact, enchantment or non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search a library for a land card with a basic land type, put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. This ability costs 1 generic less to activate for each legendary creature you control. We also play Eiganjo, Seal of the Empire. You can pay 3 mana and discard it, so it deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This ability costs 1 generic less to activate for each legendary creature you control. And last but not least, Takenuma Abandoned Mire. You can pay 4 mana and discard it to mill 3 cards and then return a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. This ability costs 1 generic less to activate for each legendary creature you control. You want to win more? You get it. While you flood the board with tokens, you are looking for your win cons, which is either Craterhoof Behemoth, an 8 mana 5/5 with haste, and when it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. Alternatively, you play Moonshaker Cavalry, an 8 mana 6/6 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. While you are filling up your graveyard with the dredge mechanic, you can also cast Eerie Ultimatum, a 7 mana sorcery, and return any number of permanent cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield. And when it comes to one of the most powerful cards in this deck, I have to mention a common card, which is Mirkwood Bats, a 4 mana 2/3 with flying, and whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. These bats get out of hand really quickly as you create a bunch of tokens in this deck, so they can easily drain your opponents out. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I would play in the Necrobloom. Let me know down in the comments below which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say, see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.